Welcome everybody back to our series on personal finance. Today we are talking about student loans, kind of the millennial debt, right? It's what we all have. It's kind of what we're all working through. Today, with me as always is Jeff Myers.
Hey, John, how's it going?
It's going good. Tell the people your credentials so we know that you're actually an expert at this stuff and not just a dude on the internet wearing only a t-shirt and not looking professional at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a portfolio manager for a local investment advisory shop here in St. Louis. I currently hold my CFP, Certified Financial Planning designation, my FMVA, which is Financial Modeling and Valuation Analyst, licensed to give investment advice, so Series 7 and Series 66. And I'm currently sitting for level 2 of the CFA, so Chartered Financial Analyst designation.
All right, fair enough. I'd say you're qualified.
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Given we're giving out advice, so we're talking about student loans today. Let's just I think we all have student loans, but can you kind of give us a definition? What are student loans?
Yeah, so student loans, the easiest way to think about it, right, is you're borrowing money to fund your college or post-grad education. So a lot of times it ends up being a situation where you and your parents together pull out loans in both of your names to be able to pay for college because college is expensive and not everyone has funds available for that.
Sure. What student loans are different in a variety of reasons. One of them is who issues student loans. So where would you get a student loan from?
The majority of student loans are issued by the federal government.
Okay.
So the government will provide funding to private colleges, public colleges, to be able to get students in the door. So you'll get a loan in some way, shape, or form from the government. On top of that, there's also privately held institutions like Hillsdale that will provide student loans to students that are not funded by the government at all, but are funded by the donors of the college.
Sure. Is that Freddie Mac that does those?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So yeah, I remember with my student loans, they all had that Freddie Mac. I believe maybe it was Fannie. No, Fannie's housing.
I think Fannie's housing. Yep.
Yeah. So Freddie, I believe, is student loans. So they're like, who is this guy? And that's my student loan check. Yeah. What are student loans are unique in a lot of other ways. Like what legally speaking, how are they different from a mortgage or kind of your more common types of loans?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about student loans is the payments are kind of deferred.
Okay.
So if you go in as a freshman, you pull out student loans to fund that first year of college. That payment isn't due until you graduate. So you essentially have the ability, or the way that they work is they will accrue interest over time during your college education. And then your payments are not due until I think it's usually like 3 months post graduation. So
Okay.
that essentially you can theoretically have a job by the time you have to start paying them off. Now, if you get loans every single year, right, that's going to be a large amount that you end up having to pay off. But that kind of makes them different than a mortgage where you get the loan and you start paying it the next month, or a car
Yeah.
loan, you start paying it the next month.
What about interest? So if you are a freshman and you take out a student loan, does interest rack up on that loan your sophomore, junior, senior year?
Yep. Yeah. So the principal
Okay.
on that amount that you pull out that first year has interest that compounds each year. Sophomore year then compounds the next 3 years, junior the next two, senior one. And then as well, while you're paying them down, of course, interest is still being paid off and compounding at the same time as long as you're paying more than the minimum.
Okay, great. And then let's talk about bankruptcy and like student loan forgiveness. These are things that are thrown around. In bankruptcy, is there anything you can do about a student loan?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about student loans is they actually don't show up on your credit report.
Oh,
So they're separate, and with that separation, it kind of some negative effects associated with that. So if you declare bankruptcy, you're in a situation where you don't have the assets, the funding to pay off your debts. Your student loans are not forgiven, and that your other debts can be forgiven, but your student loans stay with you. There are certain rules with the student loans as well. If you go into a certain type of job, I think social work and might be teaching might be another one where after a certain period of time, usually 10 years, that if you still carry a balance on your student loans, they can be forgiven. There's a lot of talk nowadays as well of just forgiving all of the student loans,
Hmm.
because it's become such a huge thing lately. I mean, with the amount of people that are going to colleges, over the last decade, 2 decades, the student loan debt balance has just increased immensely. It's in the 1 point something trillion dollars now, I think.
Okay.
It's just extremely large. So actually, I pulled this up. The average student loan debt per person is $32,000
Per
right now.
person, like that's just of people who took out student loans.
Yeah, exactly.
32. I didn't realize it was that high.
32, and that's actually increased by 20% over the last 5 years.
Oh wow.
So that number is increasing a lot.
So it's not getting better. It's getting worse currently.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
32 grand that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not a quick thing to pay on. This is somewhat similar to our conversation about credit cards. Is there's a minimum payment associated with those student loans, and actually, I'm not sure what the timeline is for federal loans if they have like a certain term period associated with them.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because so I have student loans through Hillsdale College, but so they're privately
Mhm.
funded loans. So there's a term period of 10 years on those loans. So
Okay.
I know that over after at least after 10 years I'll pay them off. Just like a car loan has a
Yeah.
5-year term on it. I think
I've
federal loans have a longer period, which is why the minimum can be a lot lower.
yeah, I think because I had some federal loans for my graduate degree, not a ton, but there were yeah, there was a little bit. I remember it being like 10 or 15 years. Like it was longer
Yeah.
term. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was something.
Yeah, well, that just helps people to make smaller payments on them, and then
Right.
unfortunately carry them on their books for a long period of time.
Right. And then you get milked for everything you're worth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this time by the government instead of by banks.
Oh, so it's better. Uh, so, uh, how would you rank like student loans in terms of like how they compare to other types of loans like credit card loans, car payment, mortgage? We talked a little bit about good debt, bad debt. Where do student loans kind of fit in that broad picture of debt?
I think it varies depending on your goal.
Okay.
But I think first off, the very first thing that's really important is first thing to pay off and to get rid of is credit card debts.
Sure.
Just because of the daily accruing interest on those, I think that is a situation where it's just too easy for people to get into that trap and never get out of it.
Right.
Um, I think you can argue that student loans should be second.
Okay.
Maybe car loans could be second, a close second there. Maybe the differentiating factor there is whether or not they show up on your credit score. So if
Sure.
you need your credit score for something and you need to pay down credit cards and your car loan to be able to improve your credit for a mortgage maybe, then I would say focus on your auto loans first.
That makes
But
sense.
usually, because what's kind of different, right, is with the auto loan, you're funding an asset that will then be your asset once
Right.
you pay off the debt. With student loans, you're funding an education, which of course should have been an asset to you and should have been an investment in yourself, but it's not really pushing you forward or increasing your net worth. It's just in the sense of creating an asset afterwards. In the sense of removing debt, it is increasing your net worth. But I think it's really important. You kind of have to judge what your goals are and determining, when and how to pay those off. I think the other key to look at is interest rates.
Okay.
You can have student loans that maybe have really low interest rate, and therefore it's maybe not quite as necessary to pay those off, depending on the level of debt that you have. You could be in a situation where they're above something else, and so then it makes more sense to pay them off faster than the other piece of debt that you have. But like I said, a lot of this ends up being relative to the individual.
Sure. And I think that's going to be kind of the theme of student loan debt in general, is that it's very specific to the person about
Right.
whether they should even take out student loans, right? I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
the culture says go to college, do all these things, but you just pointed out the fact that the average person who takes out a loan when they graduate owes $32,000. What
Yeah.
like that's a huge, like, you're entering adulthood at the age of what, 21, 22,
Yep.
and you've got a $32,000 debt around your neck. Like, what can you kind of just describe, like, what does that mean? What does that mean for that 22-year-old?
It means that they have already essentially locked up their income, a portion of their income that they would otherwise be able to spend on an asset or something that helps them to grow in the future, right? You're
Right.
walking into a job making essentially 30 grand less than what they're telling you you're making because you have to allocate those funds to paying down this debt, whether now or in the future. Um, and ideally, it would be now.
Right. Paying that off as quickly as possible. So
Yep.
that is the reoccurring theme with all debt, is pay it off as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
But it does seem to be kind of just like a huge handicap once you enter the workplace, is that the minimum payment's even going to be what, like $400 or $500, right?
Yeah.
That's, that's rent. That's a whole other rent you've got to pay, essentially. So I do think that is something we don't tell people when they graduate college is, yeah, you're going to be in a hole. You're going to be starting from, the red. You're going to be in the negative.
Yeah, and I think what's unfortunate about that whole situation is how incredibly easy it is, just like credit cards, to get a
Yeah.
student loan
Hmm.
because colleges want you to go there. The
Yeah.
government wants you to go to college because they're funding it. They want these things to happen, and so you think that it's good and you think that it's right and you should do it, and well, it's so easy that I might as well just get some debt on it, right? Because it
Right.
just makes it easier for me to go there, and that's not always the case. And um, I think this can go back to our argument before on instant versus delayed gratification,
Right.
right? There's other options available, and maybe we can get into those later on in this episode. But you don't have to take out all the debt to go to college today or
Right.
next year.
Right. And so before we kind of do get into, like, the best way to deal with student loans is to plan ahead for them. But for the person who's stuck in the student loan trap, is there anything you can, like, recommend to them? Is there any sort of, like, debt consolidation? Can they, like, refinance? Is there
Yep.
anything what are their options? If you're
Yes.
in the hole, what are your options?
Yeah, so there is absolutely student loan refinancing is an option. So a company that's become pretty big lately, SoFi,
Okay.
they started off as a student loan refinancer basically, and they have pretty competitive rates. I think you can refinance some of your student loans for as low as like 2%. So
Wow.
really, really low interest rates. And then they're an online application that I don't know how easy it was to pay down your federal loans, but like these applications nowadays are really nice. You can pay it from your phone, you can make extra payments whenever you want. You're in situations where you aren't dinged for making extra payments or for paying down the loan early. So I think that makes it a little bit easier for people to get out of those. If you're in a potential situation where your interest rate's 6, 7, 8% on those student loans, refinance it down to 2%, you're saving hundreds, if not thousands of dollars right there on interest alone.
That's great. I didn't even know that was an option. Does debt refinancing, is it essentially they buy the debt from the government and then they just give it to you at a lower interest rate
Yep.
but they get all the money that way?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
It's a great little service, actually.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think there's become a lot more lately. But the only one I've looked into really with any sort of detail has been SoFi, and they have a great app, a good website, and they make it pretty easy to walk through the process and get, approved for refinance pretty quickly.
okay. That's great. I'm glad there is an option, because the fact that student loans aren't, like, you can't get rid of it with bankruptcy,
Yeah.
they're kind of on you, and, like, they can stack up. Like, they're a very nefarious type of debt. Where, like, credit cards are
Yep.
sneaky. There's a lot you can do about it, and usually the numbers aren't that high.
Right.
With student loan, you can easily get into the hundreds of grand, as, like, $100,000 as a 20-year-old, and you're screwed. And that's you're a slave to the man at that point, right? Like,
Yeah.
how could you take a gap year or follow your passions, or whatever you're into?
You pursue the job that maybe you have the God-given skills that you have
Right.
apply to this specific job, but that job doesn't pay enough for you to be able to pay your student loans, so you have to go a different route.
That's a great point. I mean, most jobs, like ministry in general, they're not lucrative most of the
No.
time. And there's a lot of good that can be done there,
And
but
if they are lucrative,
they're not doing a good
it may
job.
not be a good
Yeah.
spot to be
I
in.
question your ministry if it is lucrative. Yeah. So, but, like, yeah, it can really prevent you and force you into kind of work positions you don't want to be in, or, like, like I made like my first job out of college, I made a mistake. I did not like the job. I need to switch jobs. I'm happy I didn't have that much in student loans, so I could afford to take that risk.
Hmm.
Many people can't. So I do
Right.
think it can be, there's a certain evil to the student loan that is rough, that it can prevent you and really shackle you down and put you in a position you don't want to be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's for the people in the student loans. Let's talk planning for student loans. If should you get a student loan? What I'm just going to throw out that broad question.
Yeah, so I've got two experiences that we can kind of talk through of two
Sure.
different ways of doing things, basically.
Yeah.
So in my personal experience, I went to Hillsdale College, and my
Mhm.
parents paid for a portion of it, and then the other portion I had to take out student loans to be able to afford to go. So it was a combination of them having the ability to pay for it, and then me taking the responsibility, and then inheriting and taking on the responsibility of the student loans afterwards. Thankfully, they were able to pay for a large portion of it. So
Mhm.
my student loan came out at maybe like half of the industry average.
That's
So I
great.
was really like feeling like I was in a good position. And I think as much as they could, we might have talked about this in the past, but my dad's a pastor. So in terms of earning potential, he's not a huge earner, but
Right.
my parents have always made enough to provide for us and care for us. And my mom is an amazing budgeter.
Mhm.
And so she was able to really budget for and plan for me going to college and being able to pay for a portion of that. And I think that really helped me out, put me in a much better position than maybe most people who just take on full student loans. An experience that I didn't have, but that my wife had, was her dad is also a pastor. And their approach was slightly different because they didn't want any form of debt for Katie to have to deal with. And so they were very much in your shoes of believing that student loan is essentially evil. And so their approach was, Katie went to community college for 2 years, and she worked the whole time. She paid her way through community college, and she did so well. She was on the president's dean's list, whatever it's called, every single semester for 4 semesters. She got all of her gen eds out of the way, and then she was able to apply and get a full ride to a private college for the last 2 years to get her degree. And then she had $0, period, no student loans, nothing that her family had to pay for, because she funded her way through community college with
Mhm.
work. And then because of that hard work, she was able to fund her private education as well. um, I think that's a really good approach, probably a better approach for most people nowadays, because oftentimes, if you're going to a larger institution for college, the gen eds aren't really going to be too specific or too helpful anyways.
Right.
And so for you to get them out of the way in a cheaper format is going to be more beneficial. And then if you can actually work your way and pay for it, you're going to learn a lot of useful lessons of balancing time and work and effort and all that stuff. And I think the third option, which I haven't experienced personally, but is my goal for my own daughter, is to be able to fund that with a 529 plan. So
Okay.
that's something where it's dedicated college fund money
Mhm.
that I have been putting aside since the day she was born, that is invested in the stock market and hopefully will grow as I continue to contribute to that over time, to where when she does go to college, if she does go to college, it will be fully paid for through that avenue, and she won't have to take out any student loans. We won't have to worry about budgeting for the expense, and it will be something that she doesn't have to experience at all.
That's
Period.
great. Yeah, and we'll have a future episode about that when we start
Yep.
talking about savings and we get through all this about debt.
Yeah.
Uh,
The fun
yeah,
stuff.
the fun stuff. Yeah, my experience with college is similar to yours. My dad helped me out a lot, but I did take out a student loan to kind of make up the difference. And then I went to grad school for a master's degree in economics, and I actually transferred grad schools, which is rare. But the
Hmm.
first grad school I went to for a semester, and I did that all on student loans, and it was a huge chunk of change. And then I transferred to Central Michigan University, and they gave me scholarships and stipends and everything like that. So I didn't have to take out student loans. So the only kind of government student loans I'd take out were from that first semester of grad school. And personal. So I guess when it comes to student loans, it is very like, where are you? What savings do you have? What are your parents willing to help you pay for? what kind of life are you willing to live as well? Like,
Hmm.
are you willing to live in a cheap apartment for a little bit, work a part-time job, and take community college classes? It's the best way to do it, I think, is to do community college credits at first. I've taken credits at community college. The classes are the same. It's a lot cheaper.
Yep.
You can, it's a little more fun, I think, too, because you just kind of like, I don't know. I enjoyed my summer community college classes I took.
I hated mine.
Did you? Oh, I enjoyed them.
Yeah. Well, I took linear algebra. That
Me
was
too.
not fun.
Oh, I took linear algebra too. It was great. Oh no, because they were taught by like the state school teachers, so they didn't care.
Yeah.
Whereas the Hillsdale teachers cared a lot, and I was like,
Yep.
ugh, you don't need to care this much. Uh, but it depends on what you want to do. I do think, personal opinion, if you're going to go to undergrad and you have no savings and you're not willing to work and you're going to do it all on student loans, I don't think you should go to undergrad. I don't think it's worth it. There are boot camps out there that are significantly less expensive, like coding boot camps that are $15,000 that offer financing that are going to give you probably a leg up and will waste less of your time. And there's also like college alternatives that I went to. I went to another one called Praxis, which is also really good. That one's, I believe, 10 grand, and they will place you at a startup with a job. So there are alternatives out there in the like current economy that we're in that you don't just have to go to and get your undergrad degree.
Yeah, and actually, there are some of those coding camps now. They don't make you pay anything until you receive a job.
Right. I think
So,
Lambda School is one of them.
yep, yeah, exactly. Because I've looked at them before. Because I got into a phase where I wanted to do some coding for a while,
Yeah.
and I thought about pursuing it. But I thought that was a really cool approach because then you go to this, learn these incredibly valuable skills,
Right.
and you're not on the hook until you actually get a job out of it.
Yeah. So it really changes the incentive structure of it. I think when it comes to student loans, the important thing is that you're doing a cost benefit analysis. Are you
Agreed.
going to college to get a fine arts degree and you're going to spend 100 grand to do that? What's that cost benefit? Because you're spending a lot of money and you're probably not going to make that much money.
Right.
But if you're going to undergrad and you're going to be a mechanical engineer or a finance professional, like you truly, it might be worth it. Or economics, like or something like that. But if you're going and it's literature, you've got to think of these majors as your education is the asset, right? That's what you're
Yep.
paying it for. So you got to see what is the return on this asset. I think that's a way
Yep.
to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach to think about, and that's something that I mean I remember personally struggling with that approach of just trying to think about when I was in my college seeking process because I didn't know what I wanted to do at all in that time frame, and I thought I like history, I like literature, maybe I'll get a degree in that. But as you think about it, you look at like jobs out of that, it's like, well, what is that going to produce?
Right.
And actually, before I even went to college, I thought maybe I was even going to pursue mechanical engineering, and
Right.
I was like, that's something that's going to pay me money, and
Right.
I can figure out that kind of stuff. So if you have, I think what's really important in that sense though is parents that help their kids think through that because when you're
Yeah.
16, 17, you're planning for college, you're not thinking about that kind of stuff. You don't know enough to think about that kind of stuff.
Right. And I think the unfortunate thing is I don't think a lot of parents themselves know this.
Right.
I think a lot of parents have been, like we all were, like my parents were, and I was for a long time, conditioned to think like, well, you got to go to school now, you got to go to college now, you graduated high school, you got to go to college,
Yep.
and you take out the loans because that's what everybody else is doing. But everybody else is kind of walking into a trap on this one and not setting themselves up for success. That formula for success, I think, stopped working probably about 10 years ago, if not more.
Hmm.
And I think we haven't caught on yet. I don't know. Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely leaning in the direction of agreeing with you on that. I
Right.
think what's key is like using, this venue that we have right here and ideally, charging fathers to be aware of this stuff and to be
Yes.
able to lead their families and their children in that right direction. To have that conversation, to think that way, and to kind of buck the status quo on college and what that means, and help their kids grow and develop in the right direction.
Yeah, and it's a tough conversation because like college is fun. I'm not going to deny it. I had a
Yeah.
great time. I think about it at least a memory pops into my head probably every day at some point.
Yeah.
Like college is a good time, but you know, I managed to go through college and not have a ton of student debt, and the debt I did have, I paid off very quickly. If I were still paying off that debt and it were preventing me from doing what I wanted to do with my life, I think I would think it wasn't worth it. You know, that's the conversation to have. And it's going to be tough because when you're 18, you do just want to like drink and party and have a good time and all that kind of stuff. And like be around, 18-year-old girls. When you're an 18-year-old guy, that's what you're gonna be around 18-year-old girls. So
Yeah.
like that's I get it. That's the desire. But 10 years, 20 years after that, it's very possible that you're still paying that off in some way. I mean, 20 years from now, assuming you've paid it off, you're still in the hole. And had you started at zero, you could have built forward. You're starting at a negative value. So
Yep.
you've really got to make sure that is college is an investment. It's not a thing you have to do.
Right. Right.
It's not a rite of passage. It's none of these things. It is an investment. And if it's not going to pay off, I don't think it's worth doing.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point to bring up, because all of this really focuses on the way that you mentally, emotionally, behaviorally approach this type of situation. Kind of a theme that we've kind of hit on a few times now with our episodes on debt so far is like, if you approach it correctly and you are thinking about it in the right way of using it to your advantage, and you know that it's going to be a drag on you for a short period of time, but it's going to serve you in the long run, then I think it's worth it. And I
Right.
think that if you have the ability, and hopefully you have the parents and the friends and the community and the church to help you kind of look at these things in the proper lens,
Right.
then you can really take advantage of that. And you can say, I know that I'll take on this debt for a short period of time, but I'm going to bust my butt in college. I'm going to learn everything. I'm going to
Right.
work hard. I'm going to get good grades. And because of that, I'm going to get a really good job afterwards. Like, if you're approaching the problem in that way, then that's the best way you can do it. Because unfortunately, most people are approaching it as, oh, I'm entitled to go to college.
Right.
I will take out $100,000, $200,000 of student loans to do so, and I'm just going to party my way through college because it doesn't matter anyways.
Right.
Those are the types of people that are going to have the lasting effect, and unfortunately are going to be straddled with that debt for a much longer period of time.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is the lesson with debt in general is be intentional with it. Make sure you're doing that cost benefit analysis. If you're going with the flow and doing what you think the world is doing, you're probably making a mistake and falling for a trap, because these big financial firms, these big financial credit card companies, these kind of universities and colleges, none of them have an incentive for you to come out of this with no debt, doing great and prospering.
Right,
They all
right.
have an incentive to get your money and get you on the hook for years. And so you just got to be very intentional and very aware of what you're getting yourself into, because the only person, essentially no one's looking out for you, and the herd is also not looking out for you, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's something to keep in mind. And then the other kind of topic with this is grad school.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, I went to grad school, and like I said, like part of it I did on straight student loans, and part of it I didn't do on straight student loans. And my general rule of grad school is, if they're not paying you to go to grad school, you're not good enough to go to grad school. So that means my first semester, I was not good enough to go to grad school. But then afterwards, I was good enough to go to grad school. I was a late bloomer. It happens. But that's generally how I feel about it. It's not worth it for most of the humanities to go to grad school
Yeah.
unless they're paying you. And the truth is, most programs will pay you and will give you scholarships so you don't get debt. If you're paying out of pocket for a PhD program or a master's program, you're probably not good enough to be in that program. Now, there are differences. Like, there are special things, like I know, like teachers unions, if you get a master's degree, your pay goes up.
Mm-hmm.
That's different. I'm talking about just like general grad school.
Yeah.
There are unique situations that completely fly against that rule.
Sure. So how did you then, let me turn this around on you.
Oh,
How
great.
did you determine switching schools to, and how did you end up going to this other school that ended up paying you? Was it all based on your GMAT, or was there like some like intentional seeking out there?
Honestly, straight luck. I applied to a bunch of different grad schools. One accepted me, but it's most master's programs in economics don't offer scholarships. They just
Okay.
have them because they can make money off of them. So I was going to the one that was near my house because it just made the most sense. I could live at home while I did it. And then one of the grad schools that actually conditionally accepted me, they accepted me, but they wanted me to take a few more classes, came out of the woodwork and just said, hey, we want you to come, full acceptance, and we'll pay you money. And I was
Wow.
like, done. Easy decision. Took it and ran. So it was very like I can't say there's a good strategy I have for it other than
Sure.
it worked out really well for me, and I'm lucky for it. Because if not, I would have could probably continued my master's program where I was and had gotten into that $100,000 in debt. It really was providential, and I got lucky. Straight, I can
Yeah.
just admit it.
Yeah.
But that also means there are programs out there that will pay you. Like that was a master's degree in economics that paid. It's one of the few in the country. Central Michigan University. If you're interested, that's if you're an economics person, you want to get a master's degree in economics, that's the place to go because they'll pay you. And it's like one of 3 in the country that will.
Wow.
I don't know. It's luck. Most good grad programs, if you're good enough, will pay you.
Yeah. So what determines if you're good enough for those? GMAT score?
Depends on the school, but it'd be GMAT, GRE, undergrad work, portfolio, depending on your major, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Whether you've been in articles, how well known you are, who you know. It's a whole other admissions process that's similar to undergrad, but more because it's grad school.
Okay.
Grad school is also different because it actually feels like a real job, whereas undergrad does not feel like a job. It feels like a party.
Right.
But yeah, that is the shocking thing about grad school. So you show up and you're like, this is gonna be more fun, right? And it's not, and it's not nearly as enjoyable. But that's part of life. Those are my thoughts. MBA and law school are also trickier.
Yeah.
I'm down on both of those unless I'm getting into like a top 5 program.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So from the advice that I've received, because I've looked at the MBA program a little bit and kind of been deterred by the fact that it's so expensive and I don't want to take student loans.
And they don't offer scholarships most of the time.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
What I've heard basically is the only reason to attend and to get an MBA is to network. And the only way that network will provide anything that's extremely beneficial or useful is if you get into a top 5 program.
Yeah.
And that's like a Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, whatever kind of place. And
Right.
then you basically go there and you hang out with people who know people, and those people get you jobs, basically.
That's what I've heard too. I've heard that like coursework wise, MBA is pretty easy, but it's all about the cocktail parties and who you know. And therefore it's all about making sure you get into a network that has like a strong network. So don't go to like middle of nowhere tech to get your MBA because it's probably has got a weak network.
Yep. Yeah, and that's also been the issue that I have because, if I want an MBA, which I don't think I really do, I would have to move. I would have to go somewhere on the East Coast or Stanford, West Coast, to be able to be a part of these networks because you can't build that stuff online. It's just not possible.
No. Right. And I think law school is similar. We have a few friends that have gone to law school. Most of them do not enjoy being lawyers, from what I can tell. So again, I'd weigh that risk reward. If you're a good lawyer, it pays. But all of my friends that were good lawyers really hated being good lawyers. So I don't know.
Yeah, and law schools from my perspective, end up being more expensive than the regular grad school.
Was it? I don't remember law school prices. Were they more expensive?
From what I've seen, I think they are a decent amount more expensive because it's a similar thing. If you want to go somewhere and get into a top tier law firm, you want to go to a top tier law school in one of those East Coast, West Coast places, and of course those are ridiculously expensive. So, like my best examples are from like listening to the Dave Ramsey show and people who call in and they have hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, like as bad as being a doctor, like 200, 300 grand in student loans.
Jeez.
I can't imagine being in that situation. It's terrifying.
I don't know how you even get out of that. It's brutal.
You would have to be in a top tier law firm where you're working basically 6 to 10 every single day.
Yeah.
And making hopefully 6 figures doing that.
And even then it's going to take you a while to pay off those loans.
Yep. And like living in squalor so that you can essentially pay 100 grand a year onto those.
Yeah. So pretty brutal. The student loan environment, it's not great. I struggle to see, again, how it's worth it to take out massive amounts of student loans. If you have scholarships, academic, sports, all that stuff,
Yep.
and you just need a little bit to make it, I think student loans make sense. If you graduate and you have like 10 grand in student loans, probably not the worst. You're probably doing okay. But once you start getting above 20, I think it weighs on you. That monthly payment gets large once you're above 20 grand.
Yep.
So yeah. Anything else you want to add about student loans?
I think the key there is just that there are options available to you. You don't
Yeah.
have to go to college
Right.
immediately after high school. You
Right.
can take a gap year to work.
Right.
You can take time to evaluate and prepare yourself to save money, to work on a plan to attack that. It doesn't have to be a situation where you have to jump from high school to college immediately just saddled with debt to do it.
Right. Right. And one thing we forgot to mention, which I don't know much about, but there's also the military, right? They will pay. I believe
Yep.
they will pay for school
Yep.
once you've done your tour,
Your
your full
service, yeah.
your service.
So the way that it works is generally you have two ways of doing it. You can do ROTC, which is
Hmm.
Reserve Officer Training Corps.
Hmm.
My dad did that in college. That's how he paid for college.
Okay.
So essentially, it's like having a part-time job while you're in school. You've got to do training,
Hmm.
go to some sort of basic during the summers you go and you're a soldier essentially working and training. During the school year you have a group that you're working or training with. You might have specific things you have to go and do, but because you do that you then give 4 years, I think is the minimum right now, to the
Okay.
military post graduation,
Right.
and with that they pay for your whole college education. That was something that I actually pursued for a while in an attempt to get someone to pay for my college.
Yeah. It is definitely something to look into. I don't
Yep.
know anything about it. I was never in good enough shape. Uh, nor did I want anybody yelling at me, but it was mostly the in shape thing. Uh, okay, that's great. And anything else off the top of your head you can think about?
No, I think we got it.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to thank everybody for watching. I know this episode was more opinion based, more kind of think through your options and less kind of hard numbers and what you're supposed to do in certain situations. But that's kind of the nature of the beast with student loans is, quite frankly, you don't have a ton of options once you're stuck with the student loans. There's a few things you can do. We talked about that, like refinancing. But the truth is, the best way to deal with student loans is before you get student loans. And
Right.
either figure out if you want them or if you need them and how you will take care of it if you do.
Yep.
So with that, I would say please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you found this helpful or entertaining or really anything. And I would just say, again, thank you for watching. And Jeff, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, John.